All right. Hi, and welcome to the next webinar in our Plantae webinar series. My name is Jason Padilla, and I'm your technical host for today's webinar. Next slide, please. This webinar is brought to you today by Plantae, the open online community for plant scientists powered by the American Society of Plant Biologists. I would like to give a special thank you to all our ASPB members who are attending today's webinar. Your ASPB membership dues help support making this webinar possible. For any of you who have not yet joined ASPB, you can join today and use the discount code %10 to receive 10% discount on your registration. ASPB members get early access to this webinars. You can learn more about ASPB and the opportunities we provide at aspb.org. Next slide, please. In addition, please know that this webinar is recorded, and we have plenty of other webinars that we've recorded in the past. You can, if you're looking for more exciting talks, whether it be plant science related directly or other fun topics, you can explore our YouTube channel by going to the Plantae YouTube channel. Next slide, please. If you're not aware, registration for Plant Biology 2026, particularly Plant Biology Virtual, I know everyone here is joining virtually. And if you're looking for more virtual content, we have Plant Biology happening. This year's Plant Biology is taking place in Ottawa, Canada from June 18th and 22nd. So if you're interested in learning more and registering for those, you could go visit Plantae. Plantbiology.aspb.org. It is a perfect opportunity to sort of learn more new plant science, sort of learn from different things that are happening, listen to different experts and various topics, and engage virtually. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items to make sure that you're getting the most out of your attendance of today's webinar. If you are experiencing technical issues, please let us know about those using the Q&A feature or emailing me directly at jpadilla@aspb.org. If you have questions for our guest speakers, please add them also in the Q&A box. Our moderator will be sharing them with our presenter during our Q&A portion of this webinar. And if you have trouble connecting and or need to leave the webinar early, as I mentioned, we are recording this webinar and it will be made available via our YouTube channel after. So again, be sure to follow our YouTube channel so you can catch all great content on Plantae. So with that said, I am now going to turn it over to our moderators who are Plantae Fellows who will facilitate today's session. Take it away, Plantae Fellows.
Thank you so much, Jason, and I welcome you all for this webinar today. Before we get into the webinar, I just wanted to take a few minutes just to introduce ourselves, the moderators for today's webinar. We are ASPB Plantae Fellows, and I'm Aditi. I'm a postdoc here at University of Pittsburgh in the US. The other moderators are Nathaniel, who is a PhD student, and Flavia, who is an early career researcher at Institute of Agrobiotechnology and Molecular Biology, all the way from Argentina. Now, when we think about startups, this is a long journey when you get from bench to business. As you can see, there's so many different startups here in the US, but it's a long journey. So to demystify this journey, we have invited 3 speakers for today's webinar. First, we have Kathleen, who works at the nexus of industry and universities and helps your ideas or your product to get out from the bench to your market. And next, we will have Sarah, who works at a venture capital firm, and she'll try to answer, from her perspective, what do they really see in budding potential startups to actually decide whether they fund those startups or not. And finally, we have Lucas, who has done it all, and he will be sharing his journey and all the major positives and negatives of whatever his journey, was involved in the journey of becoming the CEO of BioHuber. So with that, I will give it to Flavia, who would introduce our first speaker for this particular webinar. Oh, another point. I needed to mention that we have a question and answer session towards the end of the webinar. So definitely, as the speakers are speaking, type in your questions in the chat, and we will try to take maximum number of questions towards the end of the webinar. And during the webinar as well, speakers will try to, if you have some specific questions, speakers will answer those questions specifically to you. And with that, Flavia can introduce the first speaker.
Thank you, Aditi. Hello to everyone. My name is Flavia Darqui. I'm a plant biotechnologist working as an early career researcher at the Institute of Agrobiotechnology and Molecular Biology in Argentina. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Caitlin Denia. Caitlin is the Director of Innovation Partnerships for the Plant Science Initiative at North Carolina State University. In her role, she supports industry partnerships and entrepreneurial efforts to commercialize ag-tech innovations. She has a PhD in plant pathology from NCSU and previously worked for 10 years in industry at Bayer, BAF, and 2 startup companies. Today, she will talk about whether a discovery belongs in the lab or in the market. Please join me in welcoming Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's really great to be invited and to talk about my experience. I'm Kathleen Denia. It's great to meet you all. And so my plan is to talk a bit about my background, how I started off as a scientist, how I worked in industry and ended up back in academia. And then I'll talk a bit about what we're doing at the NC Plant Sciences Initiative to support entrepreneurs with getting their ag tech out into the hands of farmers through commercialization. So, yeah, my background, I'm originally from Syracuse, New York. I started off actually at community college, and I'm first generation graduate. So it's been really great to go through the whole experience of getting through to my PhD from coming from a background where I don't have any scientists in my family. But yeah, in Syracuse, I did my bachelor's at it's the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, SUNY ESF's what it's called. And I stayed there and did my master's. My background's I'm a mycologist by training, so I actually during my master's got to go and hike around in forests and collect mushrooms. And I studied the population biology of an ectomycorrhizal fungus, so that was really cool. But then I transitioned, moved down to Raleigh, and I got my PhD in plant pathology at NC State University. So while I was there, I was finishing up my PhD. I was offered to do an internship with Bayer Crop Science. So I then tried out working in early discovery at Bayer over the summer. And I was very fortunate that during that time, that's when there was still money flowing in ag tech, and they were able to create a full-time position for me. So my very first job was working at Bayer Crop Science here in RTP, and I was working in the early trait discovery division. So in my role, I was part of the microbiology team where we isolated microbes from across all these different environmental samples across the world and built out this collection of strains that we then would screen for different properties. In particular, we were looking for insecticidal proteins and antifungal proteins that could be used as a trait-based solution for, diseases and for pests. So my particular role in particular, I developed assays for screening our strain collection and identifying microbes with antifungal properties, and then seeing if we could turn that into a trait-based solution for Asian soybean rust. So trying to put that antifungal proteins into soy and have it expressed and have disease control. So I was at Bayer for about 5 years, and then I was part of the team that got divested to BASF when Bayer bought Monsanto. And so I got to experience what that was like being switched over to another giant German company. And I was with BASF for about 3 years doing similar types of research. And then during the pandemic, I was feeling like I kind of wanted to try something new. I felt like I was very fortunate that my family was supportive of me doing something kind of risky, which was leaving my, cushy job that I had at BASF. At least I thought it was cushy at the time, and going to a seed funded startup company. So I left and went to be scientist number one at a startup company here in RTP that no longer exists. We had built up to like 10 scientists at the company. It was called Tiamat Sciences. At Tiamat, we were producing animal growth factors and other proteins in tobacco. So basically having tobacco transiently express proteins that we then would purify out. And one of our target markets was the cell-based meat, animal, growing meat in culture. So producing the animal growth factors that would be needed to grow meat in culture using tobacco. So that was a really cool experience. I was head of R&D for Tiamat for a bit less than a year, and then decided that that company was, going from a giant company into a very small startup company was a huge transition. So I decided to leave, and I went to a larger startup company that was at Series C level. They're called Biomason. So at Biomason, they use bacteria to make concrete. Really cool technology, and we actually could make bricks out of this technology. So very exciting. While I was there, I got to experience what it was like to go through some layoffs. So I started off as a bench scientist there. And then a couple months after joining Biomason, there was a round of layoffs where after I was asked to be the head manager of the biotechnology team. So then I got to, move from the bench into being a manager of a team of around 12 scientists. And so I was at Biomason for about a year and a half. And then during that time, looking for my next step in my career, I had seen that the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State University was looking for someone to lead partnerships. And so I thought that was an excellent position for me, since I had experience working at the large companies, the small companies. I'd been, a PhD student, so I knew a bit what it was like to work in academia. And while I was at the companies, I had managed several third-party collaborations with academia. So I also understood that a bit. So let me bring up my slide deck now so I can tell you about what my current role is. Okay, share. All right. And presentation mode. All right. So I'm currently in this beautiful building you can see here in the slide. It's called the Plant Sciences Building. It's the newest building on campus at NC State University. So in my role, I'm Director of Innovation Partnerships. I support, as I said, industry partnerships. So basically acting like a matchmaker. If there's a company that has particular interest, be it field trials, sponsored research, interns, I'm one of the people at the university that helps get the right faculty and students in the room to talk with the companies and explore partnerships. And then another part of my role is I manage the Seed to Grow program. So there's our program that we developed to support the entrepreneurs at the university who want to create a startup company that's going to then commercialize their ag tech or clean tech, climate tech. But to tell you a little bit more first about the Plant Sciences Initiative, basically the way we operate at the Plant Sciences Initiative, we identify faculty from across the whole university and all the different colleges, and we find faculty that would like to work in interdisciplinary research teams to solve agricultural issues. So think about typically at a university, we stay very siloed. I know that was my experience when I was a grad student. I didn't particularly know what everyone was doing in our department. And so, identifying people who understand the plants and having them be involved in these teams, but then also bringing in people who have expertise in completely different areas. So pulling in faculty from our College of Engineering, our College of Humanities and Social Sciences, people who are economists, people from our College of Design and Textiles. And so we have now around 106 faculty that have been affiliated with the Plant Sciences Initiative. They technically still belong to their home department and home college at NC State, but they have this added affiliation of being part of the Plant Sciences Initiative. And ultimately, our goal is to bring those minds together with the different backgrounds to build out these teams where we then go after funding for projects to solve important agricultural issues and grand challenges in agriculture and environment. So we have a lot of input from farmers in this. Actually, it was farmers who got the initiative off the ground. North Carolina, if you're not familiar with North Carolina, we are a specialty crop state. We have over 90 different commodities produced in the state. The environment's quite diverse. We have the mountains all the way to the coast, different types of soil. So we can do really diverse research here. And so, building out these teams, we bring in the farmers, we ask them what their challenges are, and then see if we can write grants and build out teams to solve those issues. I'd say one example of a sweet spot for us is bringing together the people who understand the plants with the engineers who don't necessarily understand plants, but they love to solve a problem. And so, they come in, they can do things like building out sensors, robotics, and things like that. So it's been really fun working with the faculty here, and they're doing some really cool and interesting research. So once we develop this really cool research and technologies, we want to get the technologies into the hands of the farmers. So we do at the university have a really strong Office of Research Commercialization. Those are the folks that are receiving the invention disclosures from the faculty and then deciding if they're going to move forward with patent applications and patenting. So another part of my role is I also will kind of shop around the tech to different companies and see if anybody's interested in licensing. But then also we want to support the people who decide, I actually want to create my own startup company. So we built out this program, we call it Seed to Grow. And the whole goal is just to help the NC State innovators and startups with advancing their technologies from research to market. So we're offering several different things as part of the program. A lot of it is introductions to people who can help them with IP strategy, helping connect them with people involved in investing, marketing, all these different things. So the way we operate, we have a commercialization council. These are people, a couple that are internal from the university, and then some that are external. And these are people that have expertise in, they understand what it takes to get a company started and how to commercialize technology. The external members, for example, are people that are either current or previous C-suite. We also have people involved in investing, people who have taken companies all the way through to IPO. So these people are involved in running Seed to Grow and helping to use their background expertise to support the startup companies in the program. The whole goal is we want to identify, and so this program, I'll say first of all, is very new. We've only been running Seed to Grow for about 2 years. And so I'm still part of my job. I go out and try to identify across campus the people who are developing really cool and interesting technologies, encourage them to file invention disclosures, and then see if they're interested in starting a company. So we have done a lot of discovery of people who are interested in that, and then letting them know about Seed to Grow, see if they're interested in Seed to Grow. We typically are working with companies that are either licensing IP from the university or in an ongoing research collaboration with faculty at the university, or current students or recent graduates. We currently have, I have to update this actually, there's now 10 companies that we're working with that are part of Seed to Grow. And ultimately, our goal is to help get them towards what we're going to say is graduation, which is where they have successfully raised funds to the point where, for the example of Hoofprint Biome, they were a company that it was started by 2 postdocs at the university. They licensed the IP that they developed as postdocs back from the university to start Hoofprint Biome. They're developing probiotics for cows that can be used to eliminate methane production. Them starting off, just the 2 of them, I got to watch them grow to the point where they ended up with 12 employees. And then they closed their Series A back in the fall at $15 million. So that's the type of success we're hoping. We really want these companies to get to the point where they can approach investors, have a solid pitch deck, and get dilutive funding and grow. We do have in our building ag tech incubator. So Hoofprint was the first company in the incubators. They pretty much filled the whole space. There's 3 lab benches, like larger benches in the incubator, and then there's office space. We now have 4 companies in the incubator. And so, we do charge them a really small rent just to recover on costs, but it's a really great resource for them to take their first steps and bring in investors, show them the beautiful building and what they're doing. So it's been a really great resource for the startup companies. And then in terms of other resources we're providing, we developed a program that we call GATE. The program, the first time we ran it was this past fall, and basically every single week we cover a different topic in a business. So one week might be customer discovery, product market fit, IP strategy, and we actually bring in subject matter experts from the local community to teach those classes, bringing in people who can then sit down with the companies and really get a personalized some time with those people to talk about their company specifically. We also have launched some pitch competitions. This has been really fun. So we had a big pitch competition back in the fall where we had a student track. We actually invited students to pitch their technology that they wanted to commercialize. And then we had a track for researchers. So that'd be postdocs and faculty. And we awarded out, it was $28,000 in total to the folks that won the competition. So that was really great. We plan on continuing that. And then I just want to end by mentioning that, ultimately we're trying to develop a pipeline to push out from the university new startup companies, also talent. So, through the initiative and at the university, our main output is students and talent. So we really are trying to get them to be well-rounded and have them exposed to what it's like to work in a company through internships and, being able to have opportunities such as this one where they get to talk to people who have worked at companies. And in RTP, we're very fortunate that we have a really strong ag tech presence. We have around 200 ag tech companies located in RTP, and those go everything from the really large companies like BASF, Syngenta, down to smaller startup companies. And so this slide's representing some of the companies that we have in RTP. So I think I'm going to end there, but I'm happy to answer any questions when it comes time for the Q&A. And I'll pass it back to the moderators.
Thank you very much, Caitlin, for your presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Sarah Hammer. Sarah is an associate with Rhapsody Venture Partners, an early-stage high-tech venture capital fund investing in physical science and applied engineering innovations. At Rhapsody, Sarah focuses on investments in food, agriculture, industrial biotech, and human health. Prior to joining Rhapsody, Sarah spent 3 years at startup companies, first on the research and development team at C16 Biosciences, and then on the business development team at Microbiome. Sarah received her PhD in chemical and biological engineering from Princeton University in 2020, where she studied yeast metabolisms and engineering yeast for the production of sustainable chemicals. Today, Sarah will talk about how to secure funding from the venture capital perspective. Please welcome Sarah.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to be here today, talk to you a little bit about what we think about as an early stage investor in the space. Flavia had a great kind of overview of my background, but kind of just a little more color there. I started as a PhD student and very much was on the academic route. I thought I was going to be a professor. Really realized I was interested in these bigger picture questions of how do we make impact in the world, and how do we bring scientific innovation out of the lab and into the world. I did a short postdoc before joining industry with a professor who was trying to spin out a technology, and so I wanted to really be at the forefront of that. It ended up being the year that COVID hit, and so we did not spin out yet. We waited a couple more years, but really found that startups were a great place to get a good sense of both the business side and the scientific side. So definitely, if you feel like you're thinking bigger than just academic research, startups are a great way to do that and really see the whole kind of trajectory. So at Rhapsody Venture Partners, I will go ahead and share my screen. At Rhapsody Venture Partners, we are an early stage hard tech investor. What that means to us is we invest in companies that are innovating in science and engineering and that are at their earliest stages. So we are often the first check into a startup that's spinning out of a university, their first kind of dilutive funding, as Kathleen mentioned. My focus within the fund is on startups innovating in food, agriculture, biotech, because that's my background. But we also have, science experts across the fund in other disciplines that focus on other industries outside of food and agriculture. I'm going to walk you through today some kind of the key criteria that we look at when meeting with early stage startups to make that decision of whether we want to invest in the startup. And I'll give you a couple anecdotes and specific advice for people focusing on the plant innovation space. So the first thing that I think you realize anytime you meet with a startup is who you're talking to on the phone. Often these intro calls are Zoom calls these days, but who is on the team? Who are the founders of the company? Often we see a very technical founder coming out of an academic lab, and that's completely fine. We expect that early stage teams are very academic. I think something to be really aware of is whether you think that you want to be that commercial person too, and you want to drive the business aspects, or whether you want to bring in someone else on your team to the team to really bring that business expertise. We have some scientific founders who are very excited to get into the business part, and then some who really want to stay technical. And just knowing yourself and knowing, do I bring in someone else to help me on this journey, or do I want to take the lead on both the technical and the business is a really important kind of first question to ask yourself. And then we often ask ourselves if this team is uniquely positioned to win in this specific area. Are you a leading expert in the technology? Have you been developing it through your whole postdoc or your PhD? Especially in a hard tech space, we want to make sure that the person has the expertise required to really do that hard scientific work. Prior startup experience is always a plus, but definitely not required. Rhapsody in particular gives a lot of hands-on support to our portfolio companies because they're often early stage. So we can fill kind of those gaps of how do you start a company and begin commercialization if the founders don't have experience in that area. And then something really important to consider, sometimes boring, but just understanding kind of the legality of the startup. Were they spun out of a company? Like Kathleen was saying, do they have rights to the IP that they came with? Is the university on the cap table? Do they own some percentage of the company? Just to make sure we understand kind of all the incentives structures and whether, the founder is going to be doing things for the university and vice versa. And we want to make sure that we're helping guide everyone to make the best decisions for the company. Kind of, I think the most important thing when you're looking at a new startup company is what is the problem they're solving, and do they add value to the world? So we see a lot of people come to us and say, I want to start a company. I'm just going to start a company. That's great, but I will say we find a lot of people who are addressing a problem that doesn't really exist. So, someone might be I'll give you a really crude example, but someone's making glow in the dark plants or microbes for no purpose, really, no application. We don't know how they're going to be used, but we think it's really cool that we can make glow in the dark microbes. That's great, and that's a great scientific innovation that will probably have applications. But if you have not identified where can my technology be used in the world, you're probably not quite ready to start a company yet. And so maybe that takes more time to figure out, where is this technology useful? So by the time we're meeting with a company that's ready to spin out, we want to hear what problem can you address with this technology? Maybe it's not the only problem, but it's at least one important one. Why don't existing solutions work to solve that problem? And then what does your solution bring to the table? So why is it better than the status quo? Maybe it has a cost advantage. Maybe it has a performance advantage. Maybe you're creating a non-toxic or non-GMO variety. So what kind of is that edge that differentiates you from existing solutions on the market? This is kind of like that first gate for us. So you can have a really super cool technology, but if there's no problem and no value created, we will probably end the conversation here. If you kind of pass that gate of like, yes, this is a great problem and this could be a great innovation, we really dig into the technology. So like the first thing is, can you describe your technology to a non-expert? So coming from the venture side, you're going to talk to a lot of people who maybe don't have a PhD in the exact field that you were in. Even if they have a PhD in a related field, you'll probably realize that they don't know much about your specific expertise. So your ability to communicate clearly what you're building is really important. And we, as a hard tech investor, really like to tap into what the core innovation is. Is it a novel biology? Is it a chemistry? Is it an engineering skill? Is it a novel plant? Is it a new genome? Is it a novel mode of action for a biopesticide or herbicide? We also then, once we kind of understand what the technology is, like to get a sense of where the current state is. Have you tried this in the lab? Is this just an idea on paper? Have you done a pilot scale test if you're producing a chemical or a seed? And we like to see that the founder has kind of an understanding of the technical risks involved with scaling. So maybe you say, hey, I've done this at the lab scale, but next I need to go bigger scale. And I know that's going to be the hardest part, or that's going to be really easy because I've done it before. So kind of communicating where you see the toughest kind of valleys to get across helps us know where we can dig in and help bridge that gap. And then this is sometimes relevant, sometimes not in kind of the plant space, but regulatory hurdles in order to get the product to market. Certainly with GMO varieties that will vary depending on what country or region you're developing in. The EU is much more stringent on GMO crop varieties than the US. But you'll also notice that a lot of crops in the US still are not GMO. And so there is still some regulatory and acceptance to that. Most of our corn, soy, and wheat are GMO, but a lot of fruits and vegetables maybe are not yet. So understanding where the market is, what different countries' regulatory regimes look like, and kind of how long that process takes is important when you're pitching to an investor. Next is kind of how the solution is protected. We like to think of IP as a combination of patents, trade secrets, data moat, first mover advantage, or some, combination of those. It's really important to have some way to protect your innovation so that someone else can't come tomorrow and start the same exact company as you and potentially outrun you to a solution. So both having a novel idea, but also having ways to protect that is really crucial before we will invest. If there's patents filed, we tend to look at the specific claims filed, whether we think there's freedom to operate, if they are provisional patents or granted, and their kind of geographic coverage. Especially if you're going to be kind of in a crop that you think has multiple regions where it can grow around the world, making sure you're protecting that crop variety in the regions that you'd like to grow it. And then kind of the next big picture question is market. So what's the market opportunity here? Have you thought critically about if you address the total market, what that opportunity would be like? And then where you're starting. Often you don't attack the whole market at first. Maybe you're developing a pesticide that targets a specific pest that is attacking corn, but you also know that the pesticide could work on other pests, but you're starting with this corn pest and you have a plan to move to other pests in the future. Kind of knowing that you've thought about the path to market and why you're starting on a certain initial application and how you plan to expand and grow from there. Business model often doesn't have to be set, especially for early stage startups. You're still thinking about how is best to commercialize this, but giving some evidence that you've thought about different business models, maybe directly selling a product, licensing the technology to a larger company who can commercialize it, maybe getting a royalty fee, or some combination of those. We are really sticklers for COGS here at Rhapsody. If something is so expensive to make that no one can afford to use it, we have a hard time backing those technologies because we want them to be able to get to market. And especially in the ag space right now, we're quite pinched for cash. And so people aren't willing to pay 2x, 3x for a new product, even if it has performance advantages. So really honing in on what the price per unit is to sell and how much it costs to make it. And then, as startups get later past that initial founding stage, we ask questions kind of like, are you in conversations with some of these larger players who could be customers? Maybe they're not the biggest players, like we might not go straight to Bayer here, but if you have a small or mid-sized ag partner in your state or your local community that's willing to help test out or do a pilot with you, we love to see that you're starting those conversations and thinking about that. Last thing I'll mention before I hand it over is just we are investors at our core, and so we're always curious about kind of what the fundraising situation looks like. If you're raising your first dilutive capital round, how much money you're looking for, what the use of funds is, and kind of tying that use of funds to key milestones. So like, what will this capital unlock for you that will get you to an inflection point where you're slightly more de-risked? And so, if you have had previous funding rounds, we do look into total amount raised previously, but for a lot of early stage startups, this is usually just grant funding that we're looking at coming in. I see there's a question from an attendee of the average investment size in an agricultural startup. I would say for pre-seed rounds, like those initial spin-out rounds that we're seeing from academia, usually we're seeing something in the 2 to 5 million range. If folks have already like proof of concept data that this works and are looking to scale it up. If it's even earlier stage and it's more of an idea on paper, those rounds can be less than $1 million to just start getting into a lab and seeing if it works. But that's definitely a very flexible range. So I will stop it here and hand it over to Lucas to make sure we have enough time, and happy to take more questions at the end.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your presentation. We are now moving to our final speaker, Dr. Lucas Lieber. Lucas is the CEO and co-founder of BioEuris, an ag-biotechnology company that optimizes crop genomes through mejoramiento heurístico, which is a precision non-transgenic breeding system designed to address major global agricultural challenges. Lucas is a third-generation farmer and an agricultural engineer trained at the National University of Rosario in Argentina. Lucas holds a PhD in agronomic science and has worked at Bioceres and at Imperial College London as a scientist. At BioEuris, he has led the development of Suran, Strigout, and Razor technologies, which expand with management options, address challenges such as Striga in Africa, and promote more sustainable rice cultivation practices. Today, Lucas will talk about what you don't learn in a PhD program in the process of funding and growing a startup. Please welcome Lucas.
Thank you, Flavia. Just a second, please. Let me share a bit more about my background. I've always been passionate about agriculture. My family has been farming in Argentina for 3 generations, and hopefully my sons will keep farming here. I graduated as an agronomic engineer in 2004 in Universidad Nacional de Rosario in Argentina. And my first job was in tech transfer. At that time, I was able to learn a lot very fast about how technology could go from the labs to the fields. My second job was as a tech developer at Bioceres. We were working with GMO crops mostly. And in 2009, I decided I wanted to found my first company. I think at that time, I was technical, but I knew I wanted to become a business guy. In this company, Nitris, we were trying to make nitrogen-fixing cereal crops. This journey ended with a collaboration with different universities across the world, like Harvard Medical School, Michigan State, and Imperial College in London, in which I also worked as a scientist. While I was developing this project, I completed my PhD. And in 2016, I came back to Argentina and started BioCurious. A takeaway from this journey, compressed journey, is that careers in plant science innovation, they don't need to be linear. You don't need to worry if you haven't completed your PhD before trying your startup. But why leave the bench to build a business if data shows that 75% of venture-backed founders walk away with zero at exit, and that you will actually earn, on average, less than you would if you stayed in your academic or corporate career positions. It's not only because of the money, it's because the impact of seeing your solutions solve real world problems is worth the financial risk. When we started BioCurious, we wanted to develop a integrated pipeline that could compress trait development cycles. Bringing a GMO to market can take 17 years and cost more than $100 million. We wanted to do this 3 times faster and with a cost that could be 50 times lower. The first problem we're trying to solve is with management. And for that, we have built this pipeline. We have a platform, Huric, that is able to model millions of protein variants and select for herbicide tolerance without yield penalties. Once we predict which mutations could provide the trait, we introduce them in our swap platform with CRISPR gene editing or chemical mutagenesis. With this approach, we are not creating GMOs and we can get to the market faster. And finally, RAS, our third platform, validates that the traits perform in greenhouse and field conditions. I would like to show some of the products we are developing. Suron is already commercial. It took 5 years to get from idea to the market. It's currently being sold by our seed partners. We are not a seed company. We license our trait, and the seed partners incorporate our technology and sell the seeds with our traits to the farmers. Suron is the first tolerance to sulfonylurea and imidazolinose in sorghum. It provides more flexibility, more options for farmers. And especially we like that with this trait, you could potentially use 80 times less active ingredient per hectare than the standard weed control strategies. The trait has been licensed by 6 seed companies covering globally the sorghum production area. We will be, of course, starting in South America and scaling into the US. Sorghum is also a huge crop in Africa, and we are building over Suron a solution specifically tailored to fight one of Africa's toughest challenges, which is strike. This is a parasitic weed that infests 50 million hectares of farmland. It infects cereal crops like maize or sorghum. We are co-developed this strikeout solution through the Strikeout Alliance, in which we have other partners from the industry, Dr. Steve Bruno at Kenyatta University, Professor Jonathan Gressel at the Weizmann Institute, and we also partner with African Agricultural Technology Foundation to bring this solution to farmers. The idea here is that smallholder farmers will be able to plant the Suron seeds that are already treated with a herbicide. And this way they don't need to buy or have to access broadcast herbicide applications. The remedy, the solution is already in the seeds. So the farmer plants our edited sorghum treated seeds, and they will be able to control the parasitic weed. In rice, we are working with a similar technology. This will be a pre-emergent low-dose generic herbicide with great residuality that will be controlling different weeds, including red rice. What we especially like about Ricer is that it can enable direct seed rice in Asia. In Asia, more than 165 hectares are planted with rice. And usually the fields are completely flooded. The reason is that by flooding, they avoid weeds from emerging. Here in the Americas, we can use herbicides, and we don't flood the fields all year around. In Asia, because the fields are always flooded, the microorganisms emit a lot of methane, and they are also using a lot of water, and they have to transplant rice by hand. With Ricer, we could potentially reduce water use by 40%, greenhouse emissions by 45%, and transplanting labor by 50%. We are bringing our solutions to the global market, as you have seen, and these are some of the countries that already authorized our products. I wanted to share some of the hard lessons I learned over the years. When we talk about shortening the founder's learning curve, I usually like to talk about my own friction points or mistakes. Early on, I was spending too much time trying to reinvent the wheel. I was struggling with co-founder agreements, legal incorporation, recruiting, only then to realize that the playbook had already been written. Back then, the plant innovation ecosystem was quite small, and we simply didn't have enough shared experience in our field. That's why a couple of years ago, I would suggest any scientific founder to read every book on startups available. But I am not recommending that anymore, because you can get you can have AI as your technical co-pilot. The operational speed you can get today is exceptional. AI can draft foundational documents, structure hiring process, navigate standard legal framework in seconds. However, AI cannot replace human mentors. AI is fantastic handling the how-to, but only a human mentor can guide you through the strategics of the what if. So I strongly suggest anyone from the audience to find a mentor who has personally navigated the trenches of a startup. AI can give you the map, but a mentor will give you the intuition. Scientists are trained to reach perfection, but in the startup world, perfection is a trap. I always say that you should talk to a farmer before touching the pipette. Hiding under the comfort zone of a lab is tricky. We need to get out of the lab and keep building our business networks. Also, ag-tech is not software. You cannot release a product that works partially. This can be done with maybe an app in your phone, but you cannot do this with a solution that will be trying to solve a disease or a pest. And you need to, but you can validate the idea, and you need to find ways of being able to kill ideas that will not work. If a farmer is not going to use your technology, even if it works perfectly, you need to know that today, instead of learning that after years and millions of dollars invested. And hopefully I was able to show you that innovation is non-linear. In the startup world, I usually see that companies and founders tend to follow what has already been has worked in the past, and I call this the lottery trap. Trying to replicate a successful founder's exact routine or expecting your startup company to be as successful as a software company is like buying a lottery ticket and mimicking the exactly daily habits of the last person who won the jackpot. It mistakes luck and specific context for a universal formula. Also, talking about non-linearity, the traditional Silicon Valley path is you get a grant or you get angel investor money, you then accelerate your company, and eventually you would go into a series A, B, and C from a venture capital. It works in software, doesn't need that you, for your plant science company, you need to follow those pathways. In fact, in our experience, we were able to raise more funding from strategic partners, companies working in the agricultural industry that understood our problems, and our solution for them was not only a good investment in terms of return of the investment, but we were also providing them with tools that they were needing. Building a plant science startup is an incredibly challenging journey. The statistics are tough and the learning curve is very steep. And that is precisely why you need to do this with a team. You need to surround yourself with people that share your passion, that complement your skills, and that will keep pushing when things get hard. In this picture, you can see BioHeroes team, which is the absolute core of our company. This is an amazing team, interdisciplinary and resilient, that every day works to convert, to transform molecular science into real-world solutions. We as scientists have a responsibility of trying to solve one of the most challenging precious challenges that our planet is facing. We need to get out of the lab, find our team, and try to bring these solutions to farmers. I want to thank Plantae for the invitation. Hopefully I can answer any questions in the Q&A, but please feel free to reach to me via email. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas, and all our speakers for their wonderful presentations. Now we're going to move to the Q&A session. Let me see. For all the speakers, the question is, what is the hardest thing that you had to unlearn from academic training to succeed in a startup?
Maybe I can try. It has to do with perfection exists, but it's unattainable. So stop thinking about reading all the papers in a specific subject, and stop trying to develop the perfect experiment. Just go out there, iterate, and learn from mistakes.
Okay. Let me see.
I think another question here is, I think the question goes to Sarah. So what advice would you give to what do you advise an early stage startup in getting its first funds that focus on agricultural, biotechnological training and seed innovation? I think the question is for Sarah.
Yeah, I would say to start networking with funders in the space. You don't necessarily even have to be ready to take your first money in yet, but going to networking events and just meeting people, getting your name out there so that when doing it early, when they hear your name again, they'll be like, oh, I met that person already. And if you can build a good relationship with even one or two investors, a lot of times they'll be willing to give you free advice ahead of investing. So take advantage of people who are willing to just maybe review your deck and provide some feedback or give you pointers before you're going out for that raise.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a question to Luca. So since your innovations uses CRISPR, do you need to pay royalty to investors of CRISPR?
In general,
The
yes.
question is,
It will also depend on the country in which you plan to launch your technology. Let's say that you plan to commercialize in Kenya or Ghana. It doesn't necessarily mean that all CRISPR tools are protected by patent in those territories. The situation could be more complex in the US or Europe. So you need to make sure that if you really need to license the tools, depending if the technology is protected or not. But if you want to develop a gene-edited crop, it's completely possible to get a license to use CRISPR tools, and the industry is well prepared. There are plenty of options, and I don't see that as a barrier today.
yeah, thank you. So another question I think also goes to Luca. So how do you balance partnership with established companies at a pre-seed stage while protecting your IP?
I guess that's harder to partner with big companies, and it's easier to partner with smaller companies. In our space, the big companies, they are practically covering every aspect of plant innovation, and the smaller companies might be more complementary to a startup. They don't have all the answers, and they are not planning to cover that space. And we see a lot of synergies with mid-sized independent companies. With this, I don't mean that you could not partner with a big company, but if you plan to offer something to a multinational, I guess it has to be something very, very unique. If your solution is more traditional, more incremental innovation, I think it might be easier to partner with mid-sized companies. Balancing IP, I guess that has to be completely understood by everyone. What is doing each part, and you can make a list of contributions, and then you can start negotiating IP rights and how you will split return of the investment.
Cool. I
Okay.
think there are also questions as regards if there will be like future webinars But maybe maybe any of the speakers can just say one or two things on this. Maybe you also need someone who can also like contact you if your emails are available for people to contact you, and then maybe you can one of the speakers can say something about this, and then we can end the webinar. Does any of the speaker want to say something?
I'm sorry, what's the question again?
Yeah, if there are like opportunities to contact you again, if maybe you want to organize like future webinars to talk about how startups can happen, how to start
Yeah.
new startups. Yeah.
In general, I'd say LinkedIn's very useful. So I recommend, if people want to reach out to me, or I just in general recommend LinkedIn for building out your network. That's a great way.
Okay, cool. So I think on this note, okay.
I'm just going to say I'm
Okay.
happy to answer questions if specific to your startup or your idea, or if you have a pitch deck that you want someone to look through. Very happy to provide more specific feedback to folks.
Yeah, and I'm always open to help if possible. And I will share already my email address in case you want to reach via email, and I'm also available through LinkedIn.
Okay, thank you again, Caitlin, Sarah, and Lucas, for sharing your time and your insights today. And thank you everyone who joined and participate. We want to thank you all for being part of this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we'll catch you on the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.